Well, hello. If you landed here, you've landed on Let's Talk News. I'm your host, Leticia Remauro, and I hope somebody lands here because we've been having a hard time with the live stream lately. But anyway, I'm here, and hopefully you all will catch up with me. Tonight, we have, we're going to talk about the contempt of Congress for Dr. Anthony Fauci. Yes, indeed, he was held in contempt of Congress. Senator Paul, the chairman of the Homeland Security. What is that? Hold on a second. Let me remember what it is. They are Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. He led the meeting today where a vote was taken and they approved Governor Fauci being held in contempt of Congress. Now, it doesn't automatically translate into an arrest for Fauci. What it does is they referred it up to the DOJ and asked the DOJ to take it from here. And that's because they were having a hard time getting anything through the Senate these days. And thank you, John Thune, asshole. So anyway, that happened today. And I spent most of the day doing research and listening, and hence the hairdo. Hi, Karen. How are you? Good to have you. Hi, Francine. Good to have you. Angela Ricca and Lucille Javon. All of our girls are here tonight. I'm glad to have you here. So, did anybody watch the hearing? It was not a long hearing. They had two items on the agenda. I think it was two, maybe it was more. Something to do with the post office and something to do with this. But the hearing, I don't know which we should talk about first. Well, the hearing came out of the Biden administration. This isn't the first Fauci questioning and all that other good stuff. This all happened in the early 20s. And as a matter of fact, I can share the screen. And if you guys don't mind, we're going to go back in time a little bit, and we're going to listen to this clip from our favorite press secretary. Hang on a second. And there she is. And let's see.
And so, at the
hold on a second.
Work with them, but also give them the space.
And ahead and impose sanctions.
Wait, no, absolutely wrong.
Work with them, but also give them the space to negotiate. And so this is, again, a top priority. He wants to see the George Floyd Act be signed into law.
Hey, thank you. Welcome. I wanted to follow up a little bit on Phil's question about what had changed on the COVID, on the China lab situation, and some of the other questions as well. It seems to me, despite your response to Phil, that it's clear that at least two things have changed, right? One is that Jen spent much of the last week in response to these questions, focusing entirely on international investigations led by the WHO and dismissing the idea raised by a lot of us in the room about why not have the United States conduct its own investigation. And she continually referred back to the WHO as the proper place for this. So it seems like there has been a change. There also seems like there's been a change in the president's view of the possibility of a lab accident. I mean, the statement seems to elevate that possibility and give it more credence, at least, not saying that it's certain, but that it at least has the credence that deserves a kind of full investigation. And so I guess trying to get at the question some others have asked is like, what has changed in those two things? What was it that brought the president and this White House to a different place now than it's been even just in the recent?
I mean, Michael, I would say to you, this is something that was ongoing, right? This is something that has been going on since March. So this is not a change. This is something, like I said, that's been ongoing. What has changed is he wants to give another 90 days to dig a little deeper, to double down. To double down their efforts, and that is what he's asking for. But I said this earlier. The WHO doing their thing and the IC doing what they're doing currently is not mutually exclusive, right? This is something that could happen at the same time. And so, at the end of the day, we are committed to throwing everything we have at this pandemic, both domestically and internationally. That's why we've been so strong at ensuring that the WHO gets what it needs for a thorough, independent investigation. And that's why we're also devoting U.S. resources to learn more about it.
Okay, so that was the bullshit answer there. But that's when the FBI started coming out and saying that it was not a wet market situation, that instead it was a lab leak. And they weren't willing to piss off China. They, meaning the Biden administration. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Kevin. How are you? Good to have you. So, that was, the beginning, right? And then some hinky things started happening. And the FBI, again, as I just said, said, no, looked like it was a lab leak and we better look into this. And so I wanted to show you this because this is interesting. This is when Peters, who's now the ranking member of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Peters and Pohl announced bipartisan biodefense and life science research investigation. Right, and so Peters and Pohl, which is very funny that those are the two names, Peters and Pohl. So Peters was the chairman at the time. Pohl was ranking member. Plan to hold hearings and conduct government-wide oversight on areas including high-risk life science research, biodefense, synthetic biology, biosafety, and biosecurity lapses, early warning capabilities for emerging outbreaks of or possible attacks, and potential origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. This bipartisan oversight effort will assess and identify measures to mitigate long-standing and emerging risks and threats that may result in serious biological incidents, whether deliberate, accidental, or natural. The investigation will also seek to increase transparency and strengthen oversight of taxpayer-funded life sciences research, laboratories in the U.S. and abroad, and detection of biological threats. Okay, so you get it, right? So they are launching this together. So Peters, Democrat, but that's when the Dems had control of the Senate, and Pohl, Republican, he was the ranking member. He's the minority member. So here's what Peters says. Biotechnologies such as CRISPR are rapidly advancing, and our understanding of biological risks and threats is constantly evolving. While many of these advancements have the potential to greatly benefit Americans, we must also ensure we are addressing and minimizing the serious risks they can also pose to our health and national security. This bipartisan effort will allow us to take a comprehensive look at whether the federal government is taking the necessary steps to keep Americans safe from current and future biological threats. Sounds good to me. And here's what Pohl said. It is well past time for the Senate to conduct a bipartisan inquiry into the origins of COVID-19 And as part of the investigation, we finally will be holding committee hearings to do just that. In order to prevent a more catastrophic pandemic from occurring, we must understand the nature of U.S.-funded biotechnology and hold accountable those who engage in risky gain-of-function research. This investigation is groundbreaking, marking the first government-wide examination of taxpayer-funded high-risk life science research. I've been banging on the doors of federal agencies for the past 3 years, relentlessly seeking information on COVID-19, but it's been nothing short of a wild goose chase. To prevent repeating past mistakes, it's crucial we fully comprehend the dangers of engaging in potentially hazardous bioresearch. This involves shining a spotlight on gaping holes in oversight throughout the federal research process and procedures. Okay, so, hey, that sounds like both the Democrats and the Republicans were on board for that. Don't you think? Hi, BJ. How are you? Let's see. BJ says we need to rein in our scientists. These labs are supposed to be for the development of cures for diseases such as cancer, etc. Fooling around with these dangerous gain-of-function experiments lead to world pandemic of COVID. Well, it's like anything else. Your bioweapons is where we're going next, and nobody, we could say all we want that it's never going there, but of course whoever has the most money are going to do these experiments. The killer is that we were doing them with our enemy, or we were funding them with our enemy. Another question that has never been answered is, how did this leak from the lab? Was it intentional, and how come all but one of the Chinese scientists working in this lab disappeared, never to be heard from again? Yeah, well, this document is muddled. Can't read. I know. I'm sorry. I will hold on a second. Here's what I'm going to do. This is it's just simply a press release from back in the day. This was 2024, and this was released by then Senator Peters, who was the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. So let's start with, Binder there, saying that they were going to let the WHO try and tell us where it came from, and then they were going to do their own research. But while that was going on with the WHO, it was the FBI that said, hey, escapes from a lab, no wet market. And Anthony Fauci was wet market. And then when the FBI said lab, Fauci doubled down to try to discredit the FBI. So, the FBI was okay to go knocking on Trump's door and rummage through Melania's underwear drawer, but they weren't okay when they said where the origin of COVID came from. They were okay to tell us that the laptop was a Russian disinformation, but they weren't okay to tell us that COVID came from a lab, right? Do you see where I'm going with this? Very, very interesting. Hello, Professor. Okay, so that brings us to present day. So Rand Paul, in that press release in 2024, you can see that Rand Paul is displaying some frustration in the fact that he, as a scientist himself, right, as a doctor himself, was trying to get to the truth of this, because a whole economy was shut down, not just ours, worldwide. So who would want to do such a thing? He wanted to know, and so did I, and so did we all. So, of course, now we have our hearing with Fauci, who takes the fifth 111 times. Why? And why, when Fauci was being questioned and taking the fifth, were the Democrats now rallying around him? Is Fauci being held in jail right now until a new hearing in Florida? No, he's not. The Florida Attorney General is bringing charges against him, which, oh, by the way, his pardon does not cover, I'm going to guess that Anthony Fauci is going to flee the country. That's what I'm going to guess. Maybe to China, maybe to Russia, maybe to Switzerland. I could damn sure bet he's not going to Venezuela or Cuba or Norway or to any other socialist nation. All right, so present day. So last week we had Fauci taken the fifth 111 times, refusing to answer. And today was the contempt of Congress hearing. And Peters is the ranking member now. I have to tell you, I'm not going to show the whole hearing because Peters just droned on forever. But I want you to see what Paul had to deal with from the Democrats. You saw how the Republicans were working with the Democrats when they were in control because it was important for the American people to get the information. But today, look what happened. This is Paul trying to get, if Robert's rules, somebody makes a motion, somebody seconds the motion, and then you get to discuss the motion, then you vote on the motion. If somebody says we want to table the motion, table it until when, or table it to committee, or table it until you do this, or table it, and then you have to take a vote on whether you want it to table. So this is where we enter the hearing today on the motion being made and what happens next.
The committee will now proceed to consideration of an original resolution authorizing the President of the Senate to certify to the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia the committee's report concerning Dr. Anthony Fauci's refusal to answer questions required by committee subpoena.
Mr. Chairman, I move the motion is to be tabled.
This motion to table is intended to avoid accountability. We only have one question: whether to hold a witness responsible for his contempt towards Congress. The witness had many chances to answer the questions pertinent to our investigation, and he made his decision 111 times. I will oppose this motion and urge my colleagues to do the same. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hassan.
I move to table consideration of this resolution until the chairman invites the views of legal experts who can speak to the constitutional questions and legal authorities Chairman Paul has raised in his contempt of Congress resolution.
Blumenthal.
I move to postpone consideration of this resolution until the committee has an opportunity to hear from Dr. Fauci's attorney, who was forcibly removed from the hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move to table this resolution. I move to table consideration of this resolution until the chairman commits to abiding by the That was my last one. I move to consider it until the chairman provides all members of this committee with access to all documents.
No other motions. The question is on reporting of an original resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion. Mr. Chairman.
We will entertain more motions, but the discussion has become dilatory, and so the discussion.
I have one more motion.
Listen to my ruling. The discussion will be for 2 minutes. You will have 2 minutes to present your motion. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to postpone consideration of this resolution until this committee has an opportunity to seek leave from the Department of Justice to obtain a court order providing Dr. Fauci with immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony on matters raised during the committee's hearing.
Chairman, I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, without objection, I'd like to enter into the record all of the copies of emails that we sent to your staff asking to have access to information. And you will see in these emails there's either absolutely no response or no way to understand that there's a separate email or a separate place somewhere where we can get an email. Certainly, I'll put these in the records without objection. Certainly would be open to see any emails that actually told us about this. We can't find any in any of our electronic records, and we'd be open to seeing that, but would like to do this without objection.
Without objection. Seeing no other
Mr. Chairman,
motions, the
Mr. Chairman,
question is on
Mr.
reporting of
Chairman,
an original
pursuant to Committee
resolution
Rule
regarding.
6B, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
Seeing no other motions, the question is on reporting of an original resolution regarding contempt of Congress. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Johnson.
Yes.
Senator Langford.
Aye.
Senator Scott.
Yes.
Senator Hawley.
Aye.
Senator Moreno.
On behalf of the millions of people harmed by Anthony Fauci, resoundingly yes.
Senator Ernst. Aye. Senator Moody. Aye. Senator Peters.
No.
Senator Hassan.
No.
Senator Blumenthal.
No.
Senator Fetterman.
No.
Senator Kim.
No.
Senator Gallego.
No by proxy.
Senator Slotkin.
No by proxy.
Senator Paul.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 8, the nays are 5. On the vote by proxy, and for the record only, the yeas are 0, the nays are 2. On this vote, the yeas are 8, the nays are 5, and the motion is agreed to.
Okay, so, clear that they were doing everything in their power. And I clipped a lot of their commentary because they droned on and on for this hearing. And when Peters said he wanted to put the email, that folder, that binder into the record, he was claiming that that Paul had information that he wouldn't share with the Democrats. And Paul stated straight out, we had the website, you have the password. We told you, if you want to read the documents, you have to obtain the password. Please reach out and we will give you the password. Nobody ever reached out. Nobody ever tried to access it. Nobody asked for the password. The binder supposedly had emails back and forth to Paul's staff asking where the documents were. And the answers, according to Peters, were not sufficient for him. And then nobody was ever made aware of this website with the documents on it. So funny. So, when I was in government, the thing we kind of used to laugh about was that everybody would say, I didn't know. Nobody told me. I didn't know. How do you have a hearing and I don't know about it? And so we used to make sure that everybody, we posted hearings everywhere, and still we'd hear, I had no idea what was going on. You didn't publicize it enough. Because if you don't want to find something, you won't. Kevin says that Fauci should be held in jail in Florida. I agree, but he's got to have his due process, Karen says Gary Peters changed his tune during the hearing. He sure did, but not for the better. BJ says, I don't always agree with Rand Paul, but thank God for him, as no one else on the committee would have figured this out. I agree with you. I'm not a Rand Paul fan, but he's doing a good job. The world listens to this crook Fauci. The World Court in Hague should look into bringing international charges against him. I said the same thing. You know who they should really bring international charges against? Xi Jinping. They're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu. How about that we know that this came from the lab in Wuhan? Why isn't the international court going after Xi Jinping? That would be interesting. Another big threat is Russia and threatened nuclear war with the U.S., and our weapons are very short, and that's concerning. Trump should have wiped out Iran completely. I don't know that I believe our weapons are short, unless Biden got rid of a whole bunch of them. But either way, I'm going to trust Trump and what he's doing. Do I wish we had taken over the Strait of Hormuz? Yeah, but it would have cost lives. And, the question is, are we willing to risk lives? I mean, for the lives that were lost already, I don't want them to have been lost in vain. So I'm going to support Trump. Fetterman voted yes. He voted with the Democrats the whole time, sometimes with his hands over his face. To me, sounded like he said no. No, he didn't. Well, sometimes he said yes to table and no. I'm sorry. He said yes to table and no to convict Fauci of contempt of court, contempt of Congress. So he voted with the Democrats every time. If Fauci flees, his money should remain here in this country, freeze his assets. Yeah, the whole thing is there's a federal pardon. So you can't freeze assets when you don't have a conviction, right? You can't just go in and decide to freeze assets. I mean, unless you're Canada, they did that, right? And unless you're a socialist Democrat, because Biden and people were doing that. Banks debanked the Trumps. So he's got to be convicted. So let's see what happens. I mean, if he flees, I don't know how the Democrats stand behind him. And no matter where he goes, they're going to be pissed at him, right? Because he closed down the world. He did it. Wow. So he voted against his own views on this. Yeah, he did, BJ. Fetterman did. That's the whole interesting thing. Fetterman voted against it. And I wasn't sure about why. But maybe the answer is here. Let's see, where are we? Yeah, let's look at the conversation about the 5th. Okay. This is Blumenthal wanting to table until Fauci's lawyer, who was thrown out of the room, they could hear from him. And I think, I teed it up. Here you go.
Move to postpone consideration of this resolution until the committee has an opportunity to hear from Dr. Fauci's attorney, who was forcibly removed from the hearing last week. I should point out that Dr. Fauci had a well-founded fear based on facts that he was in jeopardy of prosecution for perjury. In fact, the chairman and others on the committee have said the quiet part out loud. They've shouted it repeatedly that their objective in that proceeding was, in fact, to put Dr. Fauci behind bars.
When the Fifth Amendment is appropriately taken where no pardon exists, the Fifth Amendment doesn't allow you to testify on the other side of the question. Basically, you are allowed not to self-incriminate, but you're not allowed to say, oh, I'm not going to self-incriminate, but then I'm going to condemn the committee and the investigation. So he attempted to do that in his opening statement, which courts have looked poorly upon, trying to have it both ways, and allowing the attorney to take the positive role of saying, this is what he would have said had he spoken, but he's not going to speak, also doesn't fit in with the history of the Fifth Amendment.
But you think there was jeopardy in answering questions? What's the color of your tie? What's the color of the floor? What's the color of the room?
The format of the hearing and the responses and who would be there could be determined by the committee. All I'm asking is that we postpone this motion until we hear from an attorney.
The reason I asked those questions was precisely to test the good faith nature of his invocation of the Fifth Amendment, because as the lawyers in the room will know, the invocation of the Fifth Amendment, particularly in a context where immunity has already been obtained, Dr. Fauci has full immunity, he has a full and unconditional pardon for a period of some 11 years. In that context, the assertion of the Fifth Amendment privilege only adheres to those instances where the witness has a reasonable fear of future prosecution, and it must be tailored to any such fear. And the fact that he wouldn't answer questions about the tie he was wearing or the color of the carpet or the day of the week, Senator Paul asked him about, did he have a folder in front of him? He wouldn't answer that. Betrays the fact that his invocation of the Fifth Amendment wasn't tailored to anything. It was a predetermined, premeditated design to evade this committee's questions on any subject, including emphatically those for which he has a pardon. And the United States Supreme Court has been clear for over a century, dating back to 1896, that when a witness has received immunity, he may not stand upon his privilege.
Yeah, but it was only theater with them. This wasn't real. This was as real as their 9/11, not 9/11, their January 6th hearings. This was scripted, and it was for the Democrats. It was scripted, and it was painful. Fauci would be more dangerous if he flees. He could release a new, even deadly virus for revenge. He'd be more dangerous to the world if he flees. Well, listen, I've always thought of him as the evil Dr. Cocktail, but how's he going to release it? Where's he? I mean, just because he flees doesn't mean that. I mean, which country is going to house him is the question. The only country that would house him, I think, would be China or Russia, right? The rest of the countries, he did as much damage to as everywhere else. Yeah, Fauci is a madman. I mean, listen, Fauci has been a problem since the 1980s. As I said, he slow walked the AIDS vaccines and any potential medicine to help people with AIDS. He's been a problem for a very long time. This is why I never cared for him. And as I said, his family, he was from Brooklyn. His family was from Staten Island, and they had plenty to say about him. Speaking of Staten Island, did we all see that Mom Donnie got booed off the stage, a national night out by the Italians in Staten Island? It was interesting. Okay, so of course we're over, but just as a little bit of evidence as to what I'm claiming about this being scripted, I want you to watch Blumenthal's rebuttal now to Hawley and talking about why he asked the questions about the tie and the carpet and all that. But I don't want you to watch Blumenthal. I want you to watch Senator Hassan, Maggie Hassan, who's sitting next to Blumenthal. And I want you to watch her mouth while Blumenthal is talking. And then right after that, to tee it up, is Senator Peters. We've seen it already, but maybe you weren't watching carefully. Listen to what he has to say. Okay, ready?
Whether he had a reasonable fear, I think, is beyond question. Not only the chairman of the committee, but 3 state attorneys general have said that they are conducting investigations of Dr. Fauci. The color of his tie, the color of the carpet, maybe you were testing his good faith, but the standard is not the response to your questions. It is whether he had a reasonable fear. And it is to be liberally construed, as you know, under the Supreme Court cases that you cited in favor of the potential defendant.
I move to table consideration of this resolution until the chairman commits to abiding by the oops. That was my last one.
Well, she seemed to be helping him along, reading a script. I've been saying that they're a cult the whole time. They accused us of being a cult. No, they're the cult. So she was reading along with him, making sure. It reminded me of a director of a play, or a mom. When their kid is in a play, she was, going along with him, rehearsing, saying the lines just alongside him. That was, to me, unnerving. And then, of course, Peters, he had his shit in his book. Okay, we're going to first table this one, then you table that one, then you table this one, then I'll table that one. Oops. I read this one already. Hold on. Let me go get the real one. They're a joke. They're a joke, and people need to open their eyes and see that. I'm no fan of Congress. Even less of a fan of those who have been in for more than 10 years. This is why. It's all theater, and nobody gives a shit about the American people. And I don't know that Rand Paul necessarily gives a shit about the American people, or he just needs to get to the truth. I don't know. But the fact that Peters, they work together for the origin. And now that we see the origin, now that we have the diaries, now that we have the information from the FBI, now that we now have his cell phone records, which, oh, by the way, is perfectly okay because they did that all from, members of Congress. Peters all of a sudden flips. And just like Fetterman, who got to Fetterman? What happened there? She looks like she's agreeing with him and lip syncing him. Yeah, she was lip syncing him. Of course, she was agreeing with him, but she was lip syncing him. She was helping him out, making sure he said the words correctly, just like any good cult does, right? Parrot the messaging. They all get the memos, and then somebody's got to say it. They take their turns. Okay, so here we go. Fauci in contempt of Congress. Let's see what comes out of it. I'm sure there will be exciting stuff this weekend. And if it's anything great, I'll come back on. All right. I love you all. Thank you for joining me. I will see you. Right now, it looks like Tuesday, but we might be going back to our original schedule. I'll let you know. I'll let you know. Look out on Sunday. See if I have anything posted. All right. Be good, everybody. Love you.